It's a great privilege for me to be back here. Thank you. I was just listening to Sherrod Brown. He is everything that your president has said he was and is. A terrific United States Senator. There's no BS with him. He's about as straightforward as they come, and let me tell you, there is no greater champion in the United States Congress for labor, for organized labor, the movement, for people, for folks who are struggling to get into the middle class than Sherrod Brown. He's a great senator from Ohio, and I hope you're going to work like hell to send him back with us so we can win the Senate and continue to fight. Thank you for what you do for him. I wrote my speech on an Etch-a-Sketch, and it's kind of all jumbled up. But, you know, just like the Republican primaries, I don't know about you, my bracket is so broken and blasted, it's beyond comparison. And anyway, I picked Rick Perry and Michelle Bachmann for the Final Four, so I don't know what to say. It's an honor to be here. Harold, I'm used to being introduced by Harold. I love being introduced by Harold. We had a good record running around the country. We won, I think, about 48 primaries around the nation, came in second in 4 of them. Take that, Mitt Romney. We did great, my friend. And after a while, you know, this handsome guy with a mustache was always standing behind me. And everybody said, hey, is that guy your vice president? Is he running with you? And who the hell is he anyway? And I had a pleasure telling people everywhere who this great president of this union is. He has done an extraordinary, Harold is a great pal, gave me great advice. And I'll tell you, like all of you, I wore a uniform back in the 60s and 70s for our country, the United States Navy. Many of you have served before serving in the way you do today. And there is nothing as special as the loyalty that you practice that is part of your brotherhood and sisterhood of the firefighters. And I honor it enormously, and I saw it firsthand in the way that Bobby McCarthy from Massachusetts and Mike Mullane and Ed Kelly and David Lang up in New Hampshire and so many others put themselves on the line, not just for me. I was the guy who was trying to talk about what we need to do in this country. But you believed in it, you fought for it, and it was because of you that we turned things around. If ever I saw loyalty, deserving of loyalty coming back from those who represent you, it was your efforts in Iowa and New Hampshire, across those icy cold, snowy fields that Harold just talked about, and I will forever honor that. And last year, I had the pleasure of welcoming, I saw a bunch of our Massachusetts guys come in a little bit earlier. I don't know if you guys were out all night or what, but I wouldn't be surprised, because last year we were at the Irish Times when the Ledge Conference took place, and I'm still paying off the tab now. But Tommy Ross from New Hampshire gave me this pin, and I wear it with great pride. I know you have to do a lot to get it, and you have to raise a certain amount of money, go out there and be on the line. I like to say I gave at the office, but I'll tell you, this is a matter of pride. Tommy, you may have had, you may be regretting giving it to me and saying, where's my pin nowadays? You certainly deserve to wear it if you want it back. But in the meantime, I'm carrying it with pride as representative of what your great brotherhood and sisterhood stands for, and thank you for that. As I listened, I really do mean a little bit about the Etch-a-Sketch. I just kind of want to talk with you. I don't want to just give you a canned speech, because we're at a really critical time. I'm going to be leaving here to go up to the Supreme Court, and I'm going to listen to that argument. But as I was listening to Sherrod, who was really talking from the heart and in a very down-to-earth way about what's at stake, I want to try to impress on you how critical this moment is. I've had the privilege of being your nominee and running for president, not maybe all of you, but most of you, I think. And I learned firsthand some things I didn't know as you travel around our country, just how generous everybody is, how big the American spirit is, how willing people are to pull together and to share sacrifice. And you have a way, when you run for president, of automatically seeing your race as the most important moment in history. You hear Newt and other people talking about it a little bit out there. I think it is no exaggeration to say that at this moment, this country's future is more on the line than I can remember it at any time in public life. And there's more hypocrisy, more lies, no other word for them, more willingness to distort in favor of greed, in favor of the few, than at any time that I can remember in public life. My old friend and your friend, Pat Moynihan, who served in the United States Senate, used to say, you know, everybody's entitled to their own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. And what's happening now is your lives, your ability to live the American dream, your ability to reach the brass ring, your ability to honor your parents and your families and to do the things that are just part of life. Making sure your kids have the best shot. The shot, you know, hopefully better than you had. That's the way everybody wants it to be. That is the American way. That's more at risk than at any time that I've seen, and not because of some outside challenge in Iraq or Afghanistan or Iran or somewhere, but because of challenges right here with a bunch of people who are willing to walk away from fundamental morality, fundamental decency, fundamental common sense, and lob it in under one big ideological umbrella and sell it when it's really an appeal to the lowest common denominator of human life, certainly the lowest common denominator of American politics. I tell you, the gap between the rich and poor is getting worse, much worse. But the gap between truth and fact and fiction and lies is growing bigger too. And it's harder and harder, my friends, to govern a great country like ours when people discard facts or when you have millions of dollars being thrown at fiction, at distorting things so that people don't make a decision based on reality. I got to tell you that there are so many issues where that's a reality, and I just want to touch on a couple of them. But the truth is that notwithstanding that, we've been able to make some progress. And what we need is for you, leaders within this labor movement, to go back to your communities, and you got to talk to your rank and file membership, many of whom get seduced away by one appeal or another to some of those lowest common denominator things. I mean, guns as an example. I'm a hunter. I've been a hunter since I was a kid. We own a bunch of guns. If I showed you the arsenal in a home, you'd be amazed. I don't run around talking about it all the time. I don't need to. I used to be a junior member of the NRA. I got all my marksman medals from being an expert marksman and so forth as a kid. I get it. But nobody I know in this country is talking about changing the Second Amendment, or there's not even any real gun discussion, and yet that becomes an issue that people will organize, and they'll give up their economic freedom. They'll give up their economic future. They'll give up their kids' opportunity to go to college. They'll give up the rights you have fought for as members of the labor movement because they think somehow somebody's going to protect that, or they're going to protect their taxes or something. Taxes? There isn't anybody in the United States Congress talking about raising tax on 99% of America. The only people who ought to be paying more are the people who have made so much more at the expense of everybody else. That's the top 1% of people in this country. I'll tell you, we're prepared. And what happens is all these guys are out there, they are ignoring the reality of the distance that we have traveled. The day that Barack Obama was sworn in as president, during the month preceding, we lost 800,000 jobs. In the month before that, we lost 800,000, 700,000, 650,000. And for 3 or 4 months afterwards, we lost 600 and 700,000 jobs a month until the policies that he put in place got into place. Think about that. This country was on the brink of economic implosion, disaster. The entire financial system was about to go under. And I'll never forget when a Republican Secretary of the Treasury named Hank Paulson walked into our caucus trembling and pale. And because of their mistakes and their willingness to look the other way while the fox was raiding the chicken coop, they turned around and said, "You guys have got to rescue us." The Republican President George Bush said, "You guys have got to rescue us." And it was Democrats who stood up and did exactly that. And there is no right in the world for these people who saw Wall Street selling securities that had no value, who were bundling housing mortgages that were inappropriate, never should have been made in the first place. No right in the world for them to turn around and blame you for America's problems and America's deficits. That's dead wrong. Let me tell you, I'm just stunned by what I see. I am stunned by what I see. Bunch of new governors in various states in the country, Wisconsin, Ohio, different places, who come around and say, "Well, we got to change collective bargaining." Collective bargaining, my friends, has nothing to do with the deficit of this nation. It has everything to do with the rights of workers and the rights of people to be able to do better in their lives. And that's the American way. Now, I'll tell you, look at what we've accomplished in the last months, despite these guys. Incidentally, in the 1900s, in the 19th century, 1800s, we had, I think it was about 4 filibusters the whole century. Between 1933 and World War II, we had 2 filibusters. Then after World War II, in the 1960s, the Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, we had a couple of filibusters, 60s, so forth. Now, these guys present us with 100 filibusters every single session. Everything we try to do, we have to do over their objection, so that even if you have a judge, just to get a judge, it takes us 136 days between the committee passing him out and our getting a vote on the floor of the Senate. When we get the vote on the floor of the Senate, the judges voted 100 to nothing. They just delay it for the sake of scorched earth policy. They want to stop anything progressive, anything that President Obama can do to make a difference, anything that improves your lives. They want to stop because they think then everybody will be so angry, they'll throw the party in power out, and then they take over again. It is the most craven, most cynical policy I've ever seen, and you know and I know that America deserves better and America will get better. As Joe Biden likes to say to people, the reality is so different, and it can be summed up in one sentence: Osama bin Laden is dead and General Motors is alive. That tells you a lot, folks. So, now, we rescued the economy. We put people back to work. We've had 23 months of continued growth. We've created 3.6 million jobs. We've been able to turn things around. Is it where we want it? No. No, it's not. There's still too many people hurting in this country. There's still too high unemployment, even as we're adding jobs. But we've got this country on a track that recognizes that we can't do the things that you want to do and all of us want to do if you don't invest, if you don't create jobs, and if you don't deal with reality. I'm just going to take a couple of minutes, and then I'll wrap up. But I want to look at this health care law. Now, you guys have health care. You have a terrific organization, terrific structure. You've got your own retirement, and we're not going to muck around with that either. You got your own ability to have health care. But So, you know, you're not affected by the health care bill. It's not going to, in fact, it'll improve life for you. But let me tell you what happens. I just heard a Mitt Romney ad this morning before I came over here, and he said, if I'm elected president, you know, in that very loose manner with which he speaks, you know, he kind of standing there like this. You know, if I'm elected president, I'm going to repeal the Health Care Act. Oh, yeah? You know what happens the day you repeal the Health Care Act? Instantaneously, you add $2 trillion to the deficit. Not only do you do that, but a whole bunch of members of your families and other people in this country all of a sudden are going to be getting letters from insurance companies again saying, gee whiz, we got your notice that you have cancer, terminal cancer, but you're not covered anymore. That's what was happening. Or kids, 21 years old, college, sorry, we're not going to cover you till you're 21. That's gone. Families' ability to keep their kids covered until they're 26. That's going to vanish. Pre-existing conditions. Women will once again be getting like, oh, you're pregnant? Pre-existing condition. We're not going to cover you. After your pregnancy, we'll cover you. I mean, this is wild and crazy where we were. People forget. But here's the real reason why it's so important. I mean, for God's sakes, people were covered. If you didn't have insurance and you were hit by a car outside this hotel, the ambulance would come, you'd go to the hospital, they'd give you the best care in the world. It's just that everybody else was paying for it. You were paying for it. The corporations were paying for it. It was the most inefficient distribution of risk you could possibly have in America. Now, are you telling me that we can tell people you got to go out and buy insurance for your car so you can actually have a license and drive? You got to go out and buy insurance for your home, and your home, you can't buy a home if you don't have insurance. You can't get a mortgage. And somehow we're going to say a human body, we're not going to require you to have insurance when only about 4% of the people in my state weren't covered. 96% of the people in Massachusetts, the health care bill didn't change anything for them at all except to lower the cost of their premiums. In Massachusetts, where we've had this law for 4 years, the premiums have gone down by 50% in the individual market, ladies and gentlemen. That's why you need this. So, you know, I'm just not going to stand around and listen to these guys distort reality and play games with people's emotions. America has a huge challenge in front of it. I'm chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee. I go to other countries and talk with leaders in other parts of the world. I see what they're doing. China's putting 9% of GDP into infrastructure. Europe's putting 5% of GDP into infrastructure. We in the United States of America, the world's leading builders, the world's leading innovators, we're putting about 2% or less into infrastructure. Because we haven't been willing to invest in America's future in the last years, the people who take care of our highways and our bridges and our tunnels tell us we have a $2.2 trillion deficit in terms of building infrastructure in America. We would have to spend $250 billion a year for the next 40 years just to bring our roads up to snuff. And we're fighting. We're fighting with these guys over whether or not we can find $30 billion in order to keep Amtrak alive and keep our infrastructure working. Folks, I have a proposal. I have a bill for $10 billion of federal investment. We could leverage $650 billion of private sector investment, not even your tax dollars. We could use China's investment fund, Europe, other people. They're waiting to invest on revenue-producing projects, transportation, energy, water, and they pay for themselves. And guess what? For every $1 billion of investment, you put 27,000 to 35,000 Americans to work. For $600 billion, we'd be at 20 million new jobs in America, let alone what we could begin to do to be more competitive and to go back and take on the Chinese and others in the world. That's our future. You're hurting because our whole tax base is shrinking because we're not creating the jobs and investing in the future of America. You cannot cut your way to prosperity. You have to invest your way to prosperity, and you have to invest in people, and you have to put America back to work, and that's what this fight is all about. Mitt Romney has said that his proposal is to cut the income, cut tax by 20%. Cut taxes by 20%, we're finished. Part of the problem in Spain and Italy and Europe today is they've got these huge austerity programs, but they have no means of growing, no means of putting people to work. And the more you cut, and you know this, cut your jobs, and there isn't a fire department in the country that isn't under pressure, or police department, or run the list, teachers. Those folks go to the store, they go to the drugstore, they go to Home Depot, they spend money. If all of a sudden they aren't and can't, your unemployment rolls go up and your tax base goes down and you start to contract. That's why it's important to have a balance in this. None of us are suggesting we don't have to reduce the deficit. We know we do. President Obama understands that, but he wants to do it in a sensible way, not an ideologically rigid way that comes at the expense of the middle class and those struggling to get into it. That's the difference in this race. And it's going to be the difference as we go into November. We need you. We're going to need you, as we did in '04 and all those times Harold talked about. We need to get back to fairness in this country. In 1993, about 50% of the income of America went to the top 1%. Today, it's 2/3. And while the income of Americans at the top 1% has gone up so dramatically, the average person has either stayed the same or gone down. You can't build a fair society like that, folks. You know that, and I know that. And you can't tell people when revenues, all the revenues that we collect at the federal level are 15% of GDP. When we balanced the budget 4 times in the 1990s and created 23 million new jobs for America, and every single quintile of American income taxpayer saw their incomes go up. When we did that, folks, revenues were about 20 to 21% of GDP. Today, they're 15%, a 60-year low. That's the problem. And I will fight, as long as I have breath in the United States Senate, against these people to make it clear to them that it is not firefighters and teachers and police officers who are the problem for our deficit. It is the profligate willingness to keep pushing money in tax cuts to the richest people in the country with no guarantee they'll even invest in America. I want a country that works for everybody. I want rules that work for everybody. I want everybody to have a fair shot. Everybody in America goes forward together. That's the credo of firefighters. I think I learned that through the years. You guys never leave anybody behind. Never. That's like the United States Marine Corps. And many of you were in the Marine Corps. Well, that's the attitude we need to bring to all of America. No one's going to be left behind. We're going to fight. And while we're at it, look at what they're doing to the SAFER Act and to the FIRE Act. It used to be $800 million. The House of Representatives tried to cut it to $315. Do you need any other statement about who's on your side? And thank God we pushed back and you guys pushed back and came up to the Hill and we got it back up to 600 and something. But 600 and something is not 800. And it's not $1 billion. And it ought to be what it ought to be so we don't have firefighters and fire equipment that fails because the brakes give out or because the truck isn't modern. You deserve the equipment you need. You don't deserve people who blame you for fraud and abuse when it doesn't exist. Let's get the job done. Thank you, and God bless.